The following 3 slides show the site from one viewpoint as it is existing, as it could look in year 1 of completion, and finally 15 years post completion. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Steve to take over and present the rest of the application.
Thank you, Graham. For those of you who don't know, my name's StephenIrvine and I'm the Head of Planning here at Oldham. And I think this is the big question that obviously I think members will have to consider tonight, because on the face of it, the members are looking at a scheme that they previously refused earlier in 2018, and therefore the question is a very simple one here. Why has the application been put forward? Members will be aware that obviously the application was turned down primarily for landscaping reasons, claiming that the proposal in question would have a detrimental impact on open land and the character area in that particular area. There are unfortunately, however, 3 particular reasons why that particular reason for refusal will not stand up. They are very, very simple ones. They are, as you can see there, that the council's deteriorating housing land supply position, and particularly its need for new market and affordable housing has become significant. The second one is because of that 5-year land supply position, the council's OPAL policy is now out of date, and therefore you cannot, members, apply the full weight that you did previously on that. The third reason is unlike what was considered last time, the site is not in an area of landscape character area. The MPPF now defines what those character areas are, and I'm afraid this particular site is not within it. To take some more details on that, as the members will see the housing land supply position, there was a lot of noise made at the previous meeting about how many completions and how many houses had been built in the ward. There, in your report and on the screen there, is exactly how many completions, houses built, has actually taken place in the ward. As you can see, it's 161 in total over a decade. No one can argue that this particular ward has been overdeveloped. Right? The second position is clearly that there is a need for all kinds of housing. As you can see there, table 2, which is the first one, it's in your report, quite clearly indicates the amount of affordable housing in this particular area. As you will see, 84 of the units are sheltered and extra care, and therefore it only leaves 51 general needs affordable housing. This scheme would double, providing 60 units, would double the amount of affordable housing in this particular ward. As you can see, that the type of housing affordable property in there from table 3, which is in the bottom, if you like, the southwest corner of here, indicates that only 34 houses are available. The majority of affordable properties in Springhead, quite clearly flats and bungalows. You will also see that when houses come forward, you can see that from March 2016, on 5 houses, 303 bids. What that is absolutely clear is it clearly indicates that A, there's a need for affordable housing in this particular ward, and B, when it comes up, it is extremely popular. That I think we cannot dismiss. Graham, move on. It's made worse by the fact that, as the members will know, the council cannot currently show a 5-year land supply. At the moment, we have approximately no more than 3 years of housing land supply because we've not built over the last few years enough housing. That's illustrated particularly by the housing delivery test, which shows in the last 3 years the borough has produced 64% of the housing it's required. Under no circumstances, therefore, can we argue that we are producing enough houses in other areas to cover that off. The second bullet point there is very clear. As a consequence of that, and not having a 5-year land supply, the presumption in favour of sustainable development applies to this scheme. Now, the members know full well, but through their training, what that means. It means you should approve the scheme unless a problem that's caused significantly and demonstrably outweighs that harm. You therefore have a clear statement in the law that suggests that. The second thing, of course, that does is, of course, any policies that restrict housing development, like our OPAL policy, which we previously used for the reason for review, must have a reduced amount of weight. Third bullet point there is another point, it's already been made by Graham in the allocation, that 52% of the site is already allocated for housing purposes. So what we're talking about is the other 48% that previously the members felt significantly and demonstrably outweighed that. That is a very difficult position for the members, because obviously the previous reason for refusal they took on the basis of landscaping harm. It is quite clear you cannot apply the weight this time to this particular application, and you are instructed that unless the landscaping harm significantly and demonstrably causes harm, which I don't think, well, obviously officers don't think that you can do, that you should be granted permission, because the presumption in favour of development kicks in. Graham, if you just kick on. If you just go down. Obviously, here are some of the benefits. It's obviously detailed in your report, but it is absolutely key, the particularly key benefits. It does deliver local plan allocations. Remember that from your planning training, you will remember that where is a local plan allocation and it's in line with that plan, you should grant planning permission for it. That's a clear instruction in government legislation, and indeed a clear instruction on our local plan. It produces obviously up to 265 new family dwellings, 60 affordable dwellings, obviously doubling the amount of affordable general needs housing in the area. Clearly will increase the diversity of your housing stock. And the next point down there is a land transfer suggested by the applicant, that says that a piece of land will be given over to St Agnes Church of England Primary School. The reason for that is either to extend the school or to produce a playing pitch for that school. Again, the members no doubt will give that due weight in the consideration of this particular application. We've already talked about the link road, and no doubt we'll come into that. And you can see below there that there are a considerable number of jobs and that sort of thing that kicks on. Economic benefits, again, there's nothing there that the members won't be surprised about, but there's no way I think you can argue that those aren't economic benefits to the borough and the general economy. And we all know that when you put new housing grows, it obviously puts money into businesses, money into shops, money into those sort of things. There's some social benefits there. I think we're all aware that clearly new housing and new jobs and decent housing and decent jobs clearly are vital for giving people the best start in life that they can. Clearly new housing has a massive economic driver and removes a lot of the social problems that Oldham traditionally suffers from. You see the link road is quite clearly there to deal with the public transport issues. It's been an allocation for the last 20 plus years, and therefore bringing that forward clearly must be given weight. And as you can see there aren't any highways concerns raised, and indeed when we come on to the highways position, you will note that 4 sets of highways engineers have looked at it, and 4 have concluded that it will improve the traffic situation in the area. Moving on, obviously in terms of the environmental benefits, well, they're listed there, and clearly some of that. But obviously there are 2 negative impacts, and your report is quite clear on what they are. First test is clearly on the setting of the listed building. You will see that the conclusion from our conservation officer was that there's less than substantial harm to those existing heritage assets. And members will be aware that when you do that, you then have to consider that against public benefits. You've seen the benefits that are set out earlier in the slide. We consider that the long list of benefits of the scheme outweigh that less than substantial harm, and means that it passes the government test on that. The second one is obviously the one that the members raised concern about last time, about the adverse impact of landscaping. Again, the problem with that approach is a very simple one. The approach with that is, of course, because we haven't got a 5-year land supply, the weight that members previously attached to that is significantly weakened by the statistics that you've seen earlier. And then we come on to the planning bandits, which is obviously the key thing to consider here. Yeah. Obviously, we think as officers that it's unarguable that the additional housing that arises from this scheme will not be a significant public benefit. It introduces much needed private and affordable housing. It boosts the supply of housing in line with the MPPF and contributes 265 dwellings and 60 affordable units, which, as we've discussed already, doubles the amount of general needs affordable housing in this particular ward. It adds additional housing choice and obviously competition into the housing market. We know about the land that being handed over to St Agnes's Church, and clearly that has a benefit to the school itself. And of course, along with that, it raises the economic and social benefits that we've just talked about, and particularly it creates additional investment in the locality, increases spending in shops and services, results in, amongst other things, jobs in the construction phase, and an amount of construction spending in the general economy that totals up to 37.4 million. And of course, new homes bonuses allows the council to spend it on other money on other services as well. It's also clearly acknowledged in the report that the site is sustainable. It's within range of a series of shops, services, schools and other facilities in Leeds. There's bus localities in the locality, and there's a range of employment opportunities in Leeds and in Oldham itself. It's therefore very clear that the site is clearly locationally sustainable. The environmental benefits will occur, so we're looking there's potential for a significant biodiversity enhancement through additional planting, through the provision of green infrastructure, through the provision of sustainable urban drainage, and that combined with landscaping mitigation provides substantial environmental benefits. There's also a significant large area of public open space being important because a lot of this site of course is privately owned at the moment, not accessible to people, and obviously that all leads to a significant weight in favour of the planning balance. The members will see that we've also included a design code to this. That is to make sure that obviously the design is of a very high quality. Members will be aware that the residential bit of this site is an outline application, and therefore the details of what the houses actually look like is saved for a reserve matters issue. But because we've got a design code in it, both the public and members will have an opportunity to be able to influence that. We've talked a little bit about the heritage benefits. We obviously, as members will be aware, have to give great weight to preserving heritage, but it is quite clear that the public benefits are substantial, and they clearly outweigh the relatively minor harm, less than substantial harm as described by other of that. It clearly doesn't affect the setting of that in that respect. It's also obviously, I think most importantly, the council needs to significantly boost its supply of its housing to meet the borough's needs. The requirement to significantly boost housing in the district, coupled with the fact that there are very few major planning applications that have been completed in this ward in the last 10 years, has to attract substantial weight in favour of granting permission for these proposals. However, the members will be aware that the need to boost supply of housing does not necessarily override all other conditions. As we've explained, there is some harm to the landscaping. It's clearly set out in your report, but we think that that amount of harm is limited in the amount of weight that you can apply to it, because it's not an allocated landscape character area. Our Opal policy is out of date for the reasons we've identified around 5-year land supply, and of course because we don't have a 5-year land supply, the presumption in favour of sustainable development applies to this particular case. Ultimately, I think the key test here is to, when you're considering the balance here, members, is whether the harm to the landscape outweighs the significant benefits of the new scheme. We think, as officers, given the significant economic and social benefits of the scheme, plus the positive weight that has to be applied to some of the environmental improvements here, the fact that 52% of the site is already allocated for residential use, it's going to deliver a long-sought policy compliant link road which has been required by the local plan for 20 years. The scheme has no design, ecology, amenity, flood risk, drainage, highways, other impacts with sustainable reason for refusal. Because of that, we're recommending approval again, particularly because the previous reason for refusal is weak and is highly unlikely to stand up on appeal. Thank you, Chair.
Could members of the audience please refrain and keep the comments to themselves?
We know we have a housing shortage in Oldham because there was recently a news article in the Manchester Evening News about one of our residents having to sleep in a car in Rochdale to get a name down for a house. My question is, if we don't build these houses where we do have available land that already has got some sort of thing, where are we going to build them? Will we not be instructed just to build on green belts when the government decides that that's all we've got left?
Councillor Jacks, it's highly unlikely that the government will take away the council's planning authority. They're reverse to doing it. It's never been done, and I can't see it happening.
Councillor Davis, you've got a question.
Thanks, Chair. What worries me with this is we've had strong advice here from the planning department that this development
houses, we're looking forward to getting new properties coming to the area. What do you say to the people who are asking us to build houses so that they can buy?
Councillor Jacks, that was a Facebook campaign, paid for adverts that was posted within a postal area. Every time I switched Facebook on, I got one of these ads, and they removed all the negative comments and angry faces that came on there.
Okay, we're finished with questions there. We're going to move to the debate, and StephenIrvine would like to start it off, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really sorry to have to do this, but I think we have to get in the real world and some facts, because we simply cannot make things up. We cannot make things up. The reality is, you have heard these things, and all these things are wrong, and I have to point this out to the members because you cannot be You've talked about the planning inspector. We've told, yep, the planning inspector had a view, and he did have a view before when we were looking at the 2011 local plan about keeping the land open. The problem was that he was doing that before 5-year housing land supply and the presumption in favour of sustainable development kicked in. Therefore, you can't put weight on that particular argument because the policy position has changed. It is quite clear that this is not allocated landscape character area. People have said, oh, it's not urban, it's rural, blah, blah, blah. That's not the question that you should be answering. The question that was put was, is it in the Warmton Uplands character area or not? It is absolutely clear that it is not. You therefore, part of the reason that it was refused law last time will not stand up because it is not in the Warmton Uplands character area. You've heard about highway stuff. You've been told that you should just ignore the advice of 4 separate highways engineers. That's Transport for Greater Manchester using a model to work out exactly what was going on. My highways engineer sitting to my right, Unity Partnership, our independent now, and the applicant's highways engineer. They all reached the same conclusion, that the new link road would improve the traffic situation and wouldn't cause either danger in terms of the network or highway safety. If you take a position at appeal, you will be faced by 4 sets of highways engineers and words. There is no way at appeal, as being suggested by some of the members, that argument is going to stand up. We heard about affordable housing. It's absolutely clear from the statistics in your report that there is a need for affordable housing. There is a shortage of affordable housing in this area, and this scheme, as you've heard from the applicant, clearly has said that he's going to produce 60 affordable housing. You have to give that some weight, because you cannot ignore the fact that it will double the amount of affordable housing in the area. That is clearly a substantial planning benefit. We've heard stories about, yep, we should build on brownfield land, we should build on mills. I absolutely agree with that. But the situation is, with our housing need position, that we do not have enough brownfield land. We don't have enough in Oldham. The whole of Greater Manchester does not have enough land. When you look at the spatial framework, it is absolutely clear that all 10 boroughs are having to allocate greenbelt land because they can't find enough sites like this one that's already allocated, all brownfield land, to do that. We can't just simply ignore that. We have to attempt to meet our housing needs for sound reasons. We all know that having a sound, affordable house will improve your life chances. Everybody knows that. I don't think anyone in this room will be disappointed. We have to start building. We heard a classic conversation that experts know nothing. Well, that's fine until you get to a public inquiry, and those experts will be faced, and you can't use words to win public inquiries. This is where this case is going to go, potentially, if it's not approved tonight, on the 23rd. I am very, very strongly telling you that that is not going to go well. The words that were, statements that were being made up simply have no evidence. The members will be aware that they have to consider evidence, not supposition. The area is overdeveloped. I'm literally incredulous about that particular one. There is no way that we would possibly win an argument that this particular area is overdeveloped in any way. The idea that Saddleworth Western Lees is full is nonsense. The reality is that we have a housing... entirely right that the position here is that we do have 52% of a site allocated. If you built the 232 houses that are applied for that, you would be building at a level of, as already said by the applicant, of 70 dwellings per hectare. That would be completely out of kilter with every other house surrounding it. Therefore, would not be.
Can Mr. Irvine be heard, please?
We keep dismissing the link road. I have to be absolutely clear on this particular point. It is a local plan allocation. Advice that you have in front of you is clear. If it's an allocation and is in line with a local plan, you should approve it. That's what the legislation says. The consequence of that is you can't simply reinvent the wheel by then suddenly suggesting that you don't like it. We've heard about traffic congestion. We've heard about junction issues. We've heard that. As I've said earlier, 4 sets of highways engineers have assessed this. 4 have come to the same conclusion. You cannot duck this out there. If we want to talk about pollution, you will see that in the report there is reams of stuff around considered by our environmental officer around air pollution, around noise pollution, around light pollution, none of which were considered by them, experts in their field, as a problem. You will see there was a claim on wildlife. You will see in your report that all sorts of bats, badgers, waterfowls, breeding birds, it's all covered in your report. The Greater Manchester Ecology Unit looked at this and came to the conclusion there was no impact on wildlife. You therefore cannot deal with it. You don't, I know you don't want to hear the experts, but that is what the experts have absolutely said.
Shall we take it to the committee for debate?
I will finish this. I finish this off, Chair, with the final point. The reason why we are saying that it is different, and I will repeat it again, because there are 3 grounds why the reason for refusal that was put forward previously by members will not stand up. It is 1, that we do not have a housing line supply, and this area has not produced significant amounts of housing. We therefore can't ignore that. Because we do not have a 5-year land supply, the Opal policy that was relied on for the landscaping ring is out of date. Therefore, you cannot apply the weight to do that. 3, the Warmpton Uplands character area, it is not in it, and therefore the reason
Can you please refrain, sir?
Therefore, the reason for refusal has a significant problem. And the point that Councillor Day has made is right. If we are going to go forward with the same reason for refusal, with the fact that we don't have a 5-year land supply, that the Opal policy is out of date and it's not in the character area, he is probably right. We are probably going to end up with cost. It is all very well going out there and saying we're going to fight this, we're going to fight that, yeah? You can't fight when you have no weapons, and if we have no case, we will have a cost application, and that will be a significant loss to the council. For those reasons, I urge the members...
Can Mr. Irvine be heard, please?
I urge the members, finally, to look at the position. There is no evidence to support any of the suggestions that we have. Indeed, there is significant evidence that suggests the opposite. I have heard nothing today that indicates that there is any evidence that suggests that the position put out in the report is wrong. As a consequence, I urge approval of this scheme, Chair. Thank you.
Take it to debate. I think Councillor Williamson put her hand up first, did you?
Thank you. It's first of all, it's about Opal, the Opal policy, which is a really key issue in not just this application, but a number of others that are happening or waiting to happen around the borough. So you're telling us that this Opal is out of date. When was it looked at and said, oh, by the way, this is out of date? So that would be my first.
I can answer that. The position is that the housing delivery test arrived in February 2019, Councillor. The reality is it's set out that we had a 64% total on our on that, therefore meaning that we were failing that. The second is that as we've done more and more work, because we have to do a report back about the housing delivery test, we discovered that our housing land supply was weak. We've obviously been doing that as part of trying to produce and trying to put forward allocations to solve that via the spatial framework, and of course around our emerging local plan. That has all come to crystallise because we have to write a report in August about the housing delivery test and what we are going to do to meet the needs of that of the borough. I'll just remind the members of course know this, but maybe the public don't. Unlike anybody else, councils are legislatively required to meet housing and employment needs. We are legislatively required to do that. We therefore can't duck that question. That means that councils have to make some difficult decisions around allocating applications. Clearly part of this site is already allocated, which is the reason why I've pushed to that particular position. So to conclude, Councillor, the position is that as we've done more work on the spatial framework, we've done more work on
those benefits. So to say that there's no reason why we can't refuse it is incorrect. We've got to decide whether those three policies outweigh the benefits.
Yeah, but I mean, I take the point that Councillor Hart is making, but you've got to read the front of the reason for refusal in particular, and obviously that sets out the reasons why those policies were relevant. And as you can see, and I'm just grabbing the, sorry Chair, I'm just grabbing the reason for refusal just to make it absolutely clear. The reason for refusal quite clearly says that the proposal would result in the loss of Opal 12 land and subsequent landscape harm to the visual amenity of the Warmton undulating uplands area. Now, reason for that, like I say, is because it's now out of date. That policy has less weight, and you can't rely on it having effect on the visual amenity of the Warmton undulating uplands because it's not in that particular area. And the consequence of that is that weakens our reason for refusal, and that is the reason why the matter is back. And I absolutely appreciate why members find that difficult, and I wouldn't normally be putting that forward if we hadn't found out about our worsening housing land supply, and we hadn't found out that the Warmton undulating uplands, which was, I'm afraid, something that our expert put on that, had to if you like, roll back from because of that. But there's no easy way of saying that that reason for refusal is weakened because of that. The consequence of that is that we just don't have the reasons or the ammunition, if you like, to take it on those grounds, because the 5-year land supply weakens the Opal 12 position, and the Warmton undulating uplands, the site's not in it, and the consequence of that, Chair, is I can't ignore that.
Councillor Malik.
Thanks, Chair.
So, excuse me, sir, but we only we're having a debate within the committee, not with the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question for the officer here. I know I wasn't here at the last planning. Can you tell us what's the difference between this application and the previous application? I know it's been said there has been no changes, but can you stress what the changes have been made?
There aren't any changes, Councillor. It's the position that obviously has been pointed out by the applicant around our worsening 5-year land supply, around the not being in the Warmton area, and the fact that because we haven't got a 5-year land supply, Opal goes. That's the only difference. The actual scheme itself, the 265 units and the link road, is the same as last time.
Any other questions? Should we move to the vote?
I'll move refusal.
I'll second it.
Grounds?
2020. I'll have to put my glasses on to read the official thing. Policy 6, green infrastructure. Policy 21 and 22, protecting natural environmental assets and protecting open land.
Yes.
And in addition, there's no different here than there was in Brighton when we refused that.
you.
Well, I'm afraid I have to ask a question of which particular, what specifically, those are obviously general policies. What actually is the detrimental harm? Just for everyone's information, to identify.
So the information is, and I had a person in your shoes telling me what we did when we wanted to refuse the helicopter thing, and I got it refused. And I went to the inspectors, and they had all the fancy talk, and I told them that without putting it together, you'll not put it back again. It's not like a jigsaw. You can't miss a piece out and then think you can find the piece and fit in. In a few years, if we build on this, the land will have gone. And I think we've got to protect it. I believe the government and the opposition want us to protect it. And I don't care, it's not my job, it's your job to look up what the fancy wording is. But I've told you what you'll find it in, and that's the very three reasons you'll find it.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, I hear you, Councillor Hudson, and obviously we are in a position where we agree to disagree, but we have to identify, if we're going to refuse an application, what the material harm is. That, for everyone's end, is something you have to do if you do it. And the problem is, just saying green infrastructure isn't actually, you've got to identify what green infrastructure is actually being affected, and you also have to identify what natural environmental assets are being affected. The problem you are faced with is that the Greater Manchester Ecology